Welcome to the Lead Pedal Podcast with your host, Bruce Outridge, where he talks all things trucking. Now let's get rolling.
Hey everybody, how we doing today? Welcome to another edition of the Lead Pedal Podcast. This is episode number 1052, and today we're going to talk finishing, training versus orientation. What is the difference? Is there a difference? And how do you know if you're in the right group? Oh, some of you may not understand how this one works. So let's get into it, shall we? Let's hear from our friends over with one of the best finishing programs going, our friends over at Bison. All right, so today, clicked off that a little fast. Excuse me. Today we're going to be talking finishing trainings versus orientation. And that's right. So what is the difference? Why are we talking about this? Because one of the things I tell new drivers a lot is when you are looking for a carrier, because looking for a carrier is a whole different thing as well. When you are looking for a carrier, you want to actually look at their finishing program more so than anything else. Not money, not trucks, not where they go, finishing programs. And you know what most people do? They don't even ask that question. They don't even know what a finishing program is. So what's the difference between a finishing program and orientation? We're going to be talking about that. We're going to start with finishing programs first. Let's start with finishing programs, then we'll get into orientation. Just so you know, just to give you the quick one-liner so you kind of have an idea. A finishing program is an extended training program for somebody after they've gotten their license. All right. Orientation program is for somebody being hired onto a company, and the company is showing them how to work with their paperwork and process and that kind of thing. That's the difference between a finishing program and orientation. So let's get into it a little deeper. Let's talk finishing programs first. Why do you need one? First of all, if you are a brand new driver, if you're somebody coming out of a training facility, that is the first thing that you have. I can tell you, I don't care how good the training program is. And we just talked about that not too long ago in episode number 1050. If you're not, it doesn't matter whether you're in the best school or the worst school, you will need a finishing program when you come out. Now, if you have experience before and you're upgrading from one license to another, you may not need as long as a finishing program. In fact, you might be able to do it if you're in a reputable school. You'll be able to do it on that. But if you are somebody who's never been in trucking before, you're a brand new driver, you got into this for whatever reason, and now you're coming out after your training, you managed to get your license, congratulations, and now you are looking for a carrier, the first thing you should be asking is, what's your finishing program look like? Because when you come out of a school, you are not at professional driver level. And I don't understand why so many people, if I said to you, hey, you know what, it's going to take you, you come out of school and you say, Bruce, okay, I'm going to hire you on my company. And I'm going to tell you that it's going to take you 2 years before you actually feel like a professional driver. You know what? Most people in today's world where we cannot even watch a video for 10 minutes. It's got to be 1 minute or under because it's got to be a short video. That sounds like the world. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it for another 2 years. It just took me 8 weeks of school. Like, they think they're never going to get there. And so they move on. But I can tell you, whether you learn on your own or whether you learn from somebody else, or whether you go through a finishing program, it's still going to take you 2 years before you feel like a professional driver. In fact, I do a lot of work with TTSAO, Truck Training School Association of Ontario, and probably one of the biggest things that they have, I guess they still have it, a certificate that if you go to a TTSAO school, in the eyes, and there's lots of reputable ones in TTSAO, I work with for a few of them. If you go through a TTSAO school, in the eyes of the insurance industry, you have the knowledge of somebody who's been 2 years in school, 2 years in the industry. Why do you think that is? The reason that is because if you've gone through a 200-hour program and you've gone through trip planning and map reading above just the driving stuff, you've gone through all the extras that they teach you, then you have learned what it's going to take you to learn in 2 years if you had to do it on your own. It doesn't mean you have 2 years of experience. Your driving's no better. It just means you have the knowledge. You've heard that phrase before. When I say trip planning, you go, oh, I've heard that. I took a day on that. I know what that is. If you don't, you're in the wrong course, sir, first of all. But you will still need that time. You will still need, everything is perfect in the world, right? Just like social media, training is the same thing. In the training world, as much as there's good instructors and they will try to tell you about the real world of trucking, let's say, they will try to tell you about the bad stuff that can happen on the road. If we harped on that for 8 hours a day for a whole week, you would probably leave and not want to get into the industry at all. So no training institute is going to harp on we're going to show you the positives. And I can tell you from being an instructor, if you are an instructor and you've been an instructor and you've had the experience of driving in your career, it is very hard to be an instructor and not be positive, because you probably have worked for good companies. You've probably done some really cool stuff. You've just gotten kind of tired of the road or whatever, and you've decided to, share your knowledge and work in a different capacity. We've all been there. I've been there. I can tell you, I've had all kinds of incidents and problems in my career. I'm no perfect driver. I'm not even as good as some of these guys who are Hall of Fame drivers and all that. I haven't had 40 years of accident-free driving. I wish I could say that, but I can't. But I can tell you, I've worked for really good companies. I've really made good money in this career. It's given me, I didn't even know what my career was going to be back in 1980. Man, I tell you, the career options in 1980, I was pumping gas at the time, so I can tell you the career options were pretty nil. And, I try not to be a statistic, but I guess if I'd gone the wrong way, jail would have been one of those options. And then I don't know what I was going to do. I hated school. That's why I got into trucking. I dropped out of school. Thank God for trucking. Thank God. It actually, for someone like me who didn't know what he wanted to do, it gave me a career choice that I hadn't really thought about. I hadn't explored. I didn't know anything about it. But it's exactly fit for me. I like to drive. I was at the driving place at 16 years old getting my car license. I like working outdoors. I like the freedom of not being in an office or a warehouse. You couldn't fit a better career to me. But I didn't know that. Nobody told me that. Same as my art. I'm an artist. For those of you who don't know, I'm actually a professional cartoonist as well. And I've been drawing since I was, 10 years old, 9 years old, something like that. Not once did anyone say, Bruce, why don't you go to art school? Not once. Now I get asked all the time, hey, did you go to art school? No. I've taken a course here and there, but I consider myself self-taught. Same with trucking. I consider myself self-taught. That's good and bad. I have made mistakes that I wish I hadn't, but for the most part, I've had an awesome career. I'm still in it. I'm able to share my knowledge with you guys. So to me, that makes you, you have to be like that, right? So But you won't know that until you go through that. You won't know that until after a couple of years of driving. They can tell you anything they want when you're brand new. There's no way of you knowing whether this is for you until you are going up and down the road for a couple of years and you go, I either like it or I don't. That's where it's going to work. And you know what? You need to know that up front. And so that's why a finishing program is going to give you the best option. It's going to give you extended training. Now, not every company can offer a finishing program, and that doesn't mean they're a good company or not a good company. That just means they don't have the resources. If you go to the small mom and pop companies, a lot of them are great companies. I've worked for many of them over the years. They've been my favorite jobs, but they can't train you. You better come in with knowing what you had to do, because they don't have they spend all their money in trucks. They'll buy you a nicer truck, but they don't have anybody that can ride along with you for 6 weeks. And that doesn't make them a bad company. They just don't have that kind of an operation, which is why we keep telling new people, go to the bigger companies. Go look at the bigger companies right now. They're the ones who have that. They're the ones who have driver trainers. They're the ones who have training staff that can help you and take time and go on the road with you and make sure. I never had that. I did have it in a way. And this is the thing. I had it in an informal way because my friend who was driving at the time took me under his wing and taught me to drive. So every chance I had, I went with him in his truck to see how he was doing. So I did actually have that formal training, just we weren't like a trainer mentor. It was just a buddy of mine, and, we were working at the same moving company, and he was willing to help me out. He was the only tractor driver I knew. So when you're looking for a finishing program, what is in a finishing program? Well, first of all, you want to make sure that they are going to and I get this question a lot in class. People will say, hey, when I get out of here, do they just let me loose on the highway? No, they don't. If you go into a proper company, they don't want you having problems on the road. Especially, you don't want to have any problems on the road within the first couple years, because if you do, it's going to ruin your career, because you'll show that you have accidents right off the bat. So you don't want to have any problems. They don't want to have any problems with you, because they're probably taking a risk on their insurance already, and they want to make sure that you're smooth and ready to go and things go. So a good company that's working with you will give you a good training program and want you to be successful. So you want to look for that type of a company. And so a finishing program is going to have a bunch of stuff that you already learned in school. It's just going to expand on that. You probably heard when you were in a training facility, you might have heard them talk about border crossings, but you didn't really go to the border. You heard what, they showed you the paperwork and they said, here's what you've got to do. But now you're in a truck and you're actually going to take a load and go to the border and you're going to go through all things. I can tell you the first time that I did that with our truck, I had gone with my buddy a couple times, no problems at the border, hauling furniture. So it was nothing new. When him and I bought a truck together, our first trip to the border, we were there for 6 hours. They unloaded half of our trailer. We had to reload it back up again because it was household furniture. So I could have said at that point, you know what, screw it. I'm not going to go across the border anymore. It's too much of a pain in the butt. They're all just out to get you, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you want to think, you can fill that in the blank yourself. And I could have said no. Instead, I found out, okay, well, that just happened that one time. I've been crossing the border. Geez, I used to do it 3 times a week to New Jersey. I can't even count how many times I've been across the border, both professionally and for vacation and stuff like that. And out of the amount of times that I've crossed the border, I can say probably on a handful of times that I had an issue where they had to actually back up and check the load, or they've checked something else. But nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that I felt that I was targeted. A lot of times, sometimes it's just the load. I used to haul peanuts, the nuts. Well, they pull you in every time you haul peanuts because they check the peanuts with an X-ray gun, some kind of like violet blue ray gun they do, to see the age of the peanuts before they come into the country. That's nothing against you as a driver. That's just logistics and the way they check a load. So you can't get all bent out of shape of them targeting you. If you're trying to hide something, then that's a different story. But if you're just doing your job and you've done everything the way you're supposed to do it, there's really nothing to hide, right? It's just a matter of going across the border and doing whatever you're supposed to do. And most companies have that down to a fine science nowadays, so it's not really that much of an issue. So you want a good finishing program, which is going to expand on those things you learned in school, but you're also going to have a trainer there. Should you really get into a challenge or a problem, or you're really stuck, that person's not there necessarily to drive for you. They're going to let you do all the work. They are there to teach you, to show you what's going on and show you how to cross the border and how to trip plan and how to meet your time commitments and how to manage your miles for the week and your hours of service and all. That is what they are there to do. They'll be there doing it as part of their system, but that's what they're there to do. So you want to make sure that you're taking notes, you're knowing what's going to happen. Now, some finishing programs, most finishing programs won't cost you any money because you're being hired. Usually a finishing program goes with the carrier. Okay, and this is where you have to ask that question. Do you have a finishing program? They all have orientation. All of them, from 1 day orientation and, sign up as an owner-operator, you got 1 day orientation. That is not finishing. You have to ask, do you have a proper finishing program? Some of the best in the industry have 6 and 7 week programs. So a lot of them are graduated where they might take you for a week around backing trailers in around their yard. Then the next week you might go on some city deliveries. So they see how you work and how customers, and then you might go on a regional route and then might go on the highway. So it might be 4 or 6 weeks, and that depends how well you're doing, how successful you are, that kind of thing. But the larger companies generally will be able to give you a finishing program. And when we come back, I'm going to share with you the difference between a finishing and orientation program, which is totally different and what everybody's seeing in the industry. Hey folks, today's driver industry is changing like crazy. There's no more paper resumes or applications for you to fill out. Nowadays, it's all online profiles, and the big companies just pull right from the ministry offices to make sure that the documents they're getting are official. So why not make sure that you're official and in control of your work history? That's where Driver Verified comes in. All you have to do is go to driververified.com and create your own profile. You create a profile, you can put your awards in, you can put pictures in, you can put your resume up there, and you know what? It is searchable. It's searchable by the insurance industry, it's searchable by the carriers, and it's searchable by you. You can send people a direct report. It's free to set up. You don't pay anything unless you start sending out reports. And you know what? The companies will even pay that for you probably anyway. But you can do this on your own. If you're a driver, an owner-operator, a company, or an insurance broker, then this is for you. Go to driververified.com, create your profile today, and get yourself in command of your documentation so that you know your work history and you have something that's presentable to the industry. And you know what? When you're talking to them, tell them the Lid Pedal Podcast sent you. All right, my friends, driververified.com. That's where I'd go. Bye for now. All right, let's get into orientation now and find out what's going on with orientation. So finishing program is an extension, probably a multi-week program, an extension of what you learned in school, and that is to get your skills better and to give you a little bit of an idea of, it is giving you an idea of the way the company operates, but it's more of a skill building. It's making sure that you're comfortable on the road, you know what to do if there's a challenge, and that you've got the right mindset for what you need to do. So that's where a finishing program comes in. Every single new driver, if you have less than 1 year's experience, you should be looking at a company that's got a finishing program. So finishing programs basically are for new drivers, and they take you from 0 to 2. Now that's different than a road test. So every company, no matter how many years you've been driving, will generally give you a road test. So you're going to go in, they will take you sometimes they take you for an hour, sometimes they take you for a day. They actually have you do the delivery, see how you operate, that kind of thing. All of them have a road test. Be expected to take a road test. And if you are signing on with a carrier, they will also have orientation. Now, if you're in a finishing program, let's say you're getting on with one of these big carriers and you're in a finishing program, then your finishing program and orientation might be mixed together. Because generally, no matter who the employee is, you will go through an orientation. So basically, let's say you sign on with a carrier and they say, okay, the first 2 days of your program is orientation. If you have no miles under your belt, you're brand new out of school, you're going to go through the orientation, the same with the guys who have been driving for 10 years. But then at the end of the 2 days, the guys that have been driving for 2 years and have passed their road test successfully are going to go out on the road and do their thing. You are going to go into what they call their finishing program, which is probably going to be 5-6 weeks, whatever it is, with a trainer. Okay, so that's where the finishing and the orientation start and stop. You will still be going into orientation, but you'll only be there for an orientation. I've seen it anywhere from basically 1 day to 1 week. some of them call it training, but it's not, they're going to, so let's get into it. So orientation, what an orientation program is it's kind of a refresher, but it's basically telling you the way that the company works. They're going to show you how they're paid. They're going to show you everything from payroll. You'll probably meet with their human resources. They'll explain how payroll works. You're going to meet with dispatch. They talk about how dispatch works. You'll talk with operations. You'll probably go through some tests like hours of service stuff. They need to have certain documentation that they've tested you. You might go through dangerous goods. If you're working for a carrier, they're going to show you all the things that are needed. They're going to make sure their documentation for your file is up to date, and that all the training that you are required to have to meet their insurance needs, not your insurance needs, their insurance needs are in your file. So if you're missing a test or you may have taken hours of service in school, doesn't mean that's the last time you're going to take hours of service. That means you had one for the school to pass the course. Now you need one for the company to show that you've been trained in hours of service with them. And that's all that is. So that's what orientation is. If they've got electronic e-logs and all that, they're going to probably show you their system, how it works. They'll probably do pre-trip inspection with you again. They'll do dangerous goods. They'll do all of those particulars with you to make sure that you understand the way to do it properly and that you do it the way that they want you to do it. Because they may have a different piece of equipment than when in school, you might have come out of a van. Now you're getting on a company that has flatbeds. So all that checking the back door stuff is done. Because you're got a flatbed, so they might spend some time showing you how to tarp or showing you how to use a roll kit or whatever it is. So that's what orientation's for. And that could take, depending on the company, depending on the equipment, depending on the size, could take anything from, 1 day to 1 week. Okay. So orientation is just as important as finishing. All right. For those of you that have experience, then you want to go through and you want to make sure that the orientation, all the paperwork, the documentation. You want to know who you have to call if there's an issue. You may have to figure out at the border some different stuff depending on the kind of equipment they operate and who their customs brokers were and all that kind of stuff. So it may take you, even if you're an experienced driver, I will find it takes you a couple weeks of running under their system just to kind of get into their mode of how they run and what they do and why they do it. So now one other thing I want to talk about before we go, we've talked about finishing programs. Orientation is basically them showing you their processes for the company that's specific to them, which may cover and blend into some of the finishing program. But there's some other programs you may want to ask about. And one of those being the the mechanics when they go through a program. It's not a finish. I just lost it. You ever lose? There's nothing like being on live radio and you just lose your word. It's the program where they, you go through and they track your hours. Somebody's going to have to tell me that. I've just totally lost it. Anyway, I'm going to explain anyway because I know what it is. I just can't. But basically it's a volunteer program where you go in and if you get like 2,000 hours, which is the same as like a mechanic going through their program. There's one for truck drivers too. And you go through that and you can actually get some cash back at the end of that for completing the program. Now, what all of these companies, it'll come to me right after I finish this podcast. What all of these companies want is they want you to stay there for 2 years. Here's what I want for you too. I want you to stay there for 2 years. Why does everybody want you to stay there for 2 years? Here's what you should want for yourself. You should want to stay there for 2 years. You seeing a pattern here? 2 years, that's it. All right. Now, hopefully you didn't get into a company just for a couple of years. If you did, you're very short-sighted. But probably most of us, I know for myself, I know people who have worked at the same company their whole life. I applaud you. I probably found that I changed companies about every 5 years, 5 to 10, depending on, there's a couple times when I've actually changed from, and everybody's got an industry, like the moving industry is an industry. So I was in the moving industry for 7 years. I had 3 different jobs within that 7 years, 3 different van lines I worked with. I started at a Guardian van line, worked there for 2 years, went to a North American van line, worked there for 2 years. And then when I became an owner operator with my friend, I went back to another Atlas van line and I worked there for a couple years. And I got about 7 years in the industry before I switched to the freight side. And that's why I say I switched industries, because I went out of the moving industry and went to the freight industry, just because I found the work steadier, a little more better time off, that kind of thing. But that was for personal reasons. So when I first switched, I probably changed jobs every couple of years. I changed industry after about 7 years. And then after that, I found that at the first there was about 2 years. There's probably about 5 years where I had worked for 2 different companies. So every couple of years I changed. Once I got into my highway driving where I was comfortable, most of the companies I was there about 5 years before changing, and it got longer the longer you get. So the first couple were probably about 3 years. Then I went to one for about 6 years. Then I went to one for about 13 years. So that's the progression of driving. That's probably going to happen. So, but what you want to do is the first 2 years are the critical ones for you. If you're a brand new driver, stay for those first 2 years. Try not to move companies if you can. So hopefully you're getting a good one off the bat. Take in their training, learn to drive, learn the industry. After that 2 years mark is when things open up on the insurance side for you, which will open up a lot more job options if you do want to move. And also it will open up a lot of companies will be looking for you if you've done things right. And that'll open up a lot of pay options for you too. And that's a good point to start thinking, do you want to specialize? Do you want to get into tanker work or flatbed or some other kind of work that is more specialized, which is of course going to be more job security than the steering wheel holder I talked about in episode number 1050. So stay there. 2 years is your goal for everybody. It's the goal for the company. It's the goal for you. You'll see them all. Even if you get into some kind of a special program with them, usually they want you to stay there for 2 years. After 2 years, you've done your time. Even if you're one of these ones who are getting your training through a company, there's some companies where they have their own schools and you're getting your training through a school. A lot of times they will say the training's free because they expect you to stay 2 years. It's kind of like paying off your training while working overtime. All right. And be very careful with that because that could affect paycheck. Maybe they're not paying you as much, that kind of thing. So make sure you read all the fine print of whatever contracts you've got. But that should be your goal, to stay for 2 years. We all want that for you. We want you to be successful, but we want a good industry. We don't want, I think all of us are just tired of people coming in for the sake of coming in. And I know there's what they call a truck driver shortage. So everybody's like, just come in. But if you just get people in that are going to have accidents, we're no better off. We're better off to have the shortage in my book. Anyway, that's what I'm hoping you're going to find out. And anyway, whatever you do, look for a good finishing program. Forget the money, forget the trucks, forget all that. Ask, is this a good finishing program? And if it is, get hired on with that company, stay there for 2 years, be a passionate driver, learn professionalism and the driving community, and you will be better off. All right. If you want to see some good companies, well, one of the places to go is for the Trucking Network. They are having their job fair Saturday, September 23rd. It's going to be at Brampton, Ontario at the Pearson Convention Center. And you can talk to all the companies. It's always full of a lot of different carriers, whether you're a mechanic, somebody in operations, admin, dispatch, whatever you do. New truck drivers, come on down, get your resume ready, and you can get down there and you'll probably have a job by the end of the day. They even give you cash bonus prizes. They've got raffle draws, so hey, maybe you'll even win a prize there at the same time. So you can learn more about that and even register if you want at thetruckingnetwork.ca. That's the place to go. Make sure you tell them that we sent you. And hey, thanks for listening to the episode. Hopefully you got some good information out of that. Hopefully you know now where to direct your efforts. And you can learn about us and stay up to date on our socials. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, LinkedIn, TikTok. Join our fan club, and you can also find out a lot of our stuff on YouTube. In fact, all of our podcasts go to YouTube now, so you can certainly check it out there. All right, my friends, talk to you later. Hope you're having a good day. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
This has been another episode of the Lead Pedal Podcast. For more information or to subscribe to the podcast, visit theleadpedalpodcast.com and be sure to follow the podcast on Facebook and Twitter.